Hello again, everyone. We are talking about setting up a successful PMO, and in part one, we talked about the main factors that cause failure of a PMO, and we talked about the high rate of failure of PMOs, unfortunately, but at the same time, the high level of demand that companies have of PMOs because of their important value in the organization. We're going to continue now and talk about how to make a PMO successful, how PMOs succeed. How do we set them up to succeed? And we started in the last part, we talked about we need to make the PMO a sustainable function by ensuring we address the stakeholders of the PMO, the processes, the technology, and the sustainability. So I will not go over the slide again. And we talked about also the different environmental factors and the different elements that we need to understand so that our PMO succeeds. There's a paper that I did a few years back called the PMO Organizational Cue Model. You can download it from my website if you like. So I will not go over the whole paper, but what I would like to mention is the paper shows how important it is to address the different factors related to a PMO if you want to succeed with a PMO. And the paper shows that there is the system dimension of a PMO, which talks about the governance, resources, methodology, and technology. There's the alignment dimension, which talks about strategy, the portfolio, the projects, programs, of course, and operations. And there's the stakeholders dimension, which goes across the hierarchy, vertically and horizontally, with executives, department managers, project managers, and team. And also there is the external factors around us, like the organizational level of maturity, the sponsorship, the external factors, and the organizational culture. The reason I mentioned this paper is just to show that we have a complex environment surrounding the PMO, and we need to understand this environment and address it for our PMO to be successful. But if you'd like to see the paper, it is on my website. I will talk about 4 key success elements here for the PMO. If you want your PMO to succeed, make sure you have documented governance of the PMO that shows the reporting relationships up and down and across the organization. Not only reporting relationships, but also dotted line relationships, where you have collaboration and coordination among departments as related to the PMO. Also ensure you have operational level committees that help the PMO cross departmental boundaries to get what needs to be done. And of course, we need a steering committee that includes cross-departmental representation at a high level sufficient to support the PMO. That's one. Number 2, you need to have a clear PMO architecture. When we talk about architecture, we're talking about a blueprint. What needs to happen is that we need a PMO expert, someone, a veteran, who has experience setting up PMOs, to sit down and draw the blueprint of what we want our PMO to be. This is what we want it to be, not how we're going to start it. So we're drawing the ideal big picture of what the PMO should look like when it's fully operational, including what it will do, how it interfaces with the rest of the organization, what are the KPIs for it, what are the objectives, what is the strategy, how does it align with the strategy of the organization, the resources needed, the organization structure, the PMO structure, how projects will be handled, the types of projects, etc. And this must be customized to the organization. This cannot be generic. It has to answer how does this PMO fulfill the strategic objectives of the organization. So this is architecture. This is the big picture. It must be done. We also need a roadmap for phased implementation, meaning we have an ideal PMO that we would like to set up, beautiful PMO, but now we are not there yet. And we cannot go the whole distance at once. We have to do it in a phased fashion. And so we need to talk about what are the phases. What's the first phase we're going to do? What's the second phase? And I will talk about that now, how I propose to do the phases. Finally, we need to talk about organizational change management. What are the forces in the organization that will affect the success of the PMO? What are the things that will support, and what are the things that might hinder the PMO and pull it back or resist it? And we need to talk about how to raise awareness about the importance of the PMO, how to motivate the different stakeholders with the what's in it for me, how to show the urgency of setting up a PMO, and show also What's in it for me, as we said? We need commitment at the right levels, not only at the executive level. Management is key. Department management, line management, and from the team members, of course. So we need commitment, we need performance and control performance, and we need also to sustain. So all of this has to be taken into consideration with change management, key for the success of the PMO. If governance is not documented, architecture is not set up by an expert, if we don't have a phased implementation methodology also set up with expertise, the right expertise, internal and external, we don't have organizational change management addressed, very hard for a PMO to succeed. We talked about phased implementation. So what are the phases we should go through for the PMO to succeed? There are different ways to do it, but I'll show you one of the ways that I have seen work very nicely is to start with getting the PMO operational in phase 1. So the goal is to get a PMO operation. Then we go into a PMO that's measured and controlled, which means we can look at the performance of our projects, the performance of the PMO, the performance, and also looking at KPIs. So we measure and we report on performance. The third level is where we have a sustained and improved PMO. In this level, we ensure that the PMO does not stay stagnant. We keep improving on our PMO. And we sustain the PMO. So many PMOs, unfortunately, when the sponsor moves or changes, the PMO goes away. When another priority comes up, the PMO goes away, instead of actually working towards this priority as part of the organization. So phase 3 will ensure the PMO will be there, sustained and improved. Let's look at each phase real quick, just to go into a little bit more detail. In phase 1, what I like to do is, first of all, we need to start with an architecture big picture that covers all the phases and a governance document about how we want the PMO governance to be. So this is done in the beginning, and I prefer to have it done by a consultant in cooperation and coordination with the organization, because the consultant cannot work alone. Once this is set, we can actually set up our PMO to get it operational. I like to see quick wins usually in the beginning. So when we set up the PMO, we have to do quick wins. We just need to get it operational. It does not have to do sophisticated things. Simple, just get the PMO operational. Give you examples, so we talk practical. Give you a few examples of what can be done. One of the things that I have seen done very successfully is to start the PMO with ensuring that a charter is done before any resources are committed to any project on the organization, in the organization. So the organization, what they did, they put together a process for the charter specifically, not a general project management process, saying from now on, if a project needs to be done, there has to be a proposal. Once it's approved, then we need to write a charter. And the charter has to be signed by 1, 2, 3, 4. If the charter is not signed, no resources allowed to put time on a project. There was a reason this was done at this organization, because there were too many requests from management for projects and initiatives that don't necessarily support the strategic objectives of the organization, and they were taking the focus away of the organizational resources from what matters. So that's one example. It was done, it did not take long, and it was beautiful, and it gave confidence that the PMO can actually carry out simple initiatives that have high value. And from there on, they did another one, then another one, etc. Another one that I've seen very successful is to create some kind of executive dashboard. Online, preferably cloud, something cloud, where the questions of management, not only executives, about the projects in the organization are answered at a sufficient level of detail without going into too much detail. This is very helpful because first, it brings visibility to the projects. It also allows executives to get answers without creating a big issue in the organization looking for data that they need. It also ensures that executives and project managers are having dialogue as related to the projects, and definitely it creates value. I love an initiative like this. But again, if your organization needs something like this, that's a good idea. A third one, very simple one, is to start supporting and building the capacity of the project managers by looking into their training needs, into what their projects require of them as far as capacity, and to build a training program that includes both electronic e-learning as well as classroom learning, and or maybe just e-learning. Just focus on the e-learning part, on the orientation part, and remember, you don't have to do it only for project managers. I believe that the team and the organization need training on project management more than project managers. So if you create some kind of orientation or awareness session for everybody who joins the organization, anybody in the organization to look at, to understand the value of project management and their role in project management, that would be great. That's another thing that the PMO can start with. Quick win, show value. Now the PMO setup in the first phase can continue like this with small, simple initiatives, building on the PMO, building on the PMO role, building on the PMO function. And this way you set up a PMO that's already adding value. Meanwhile, I believe that at the same time, while this is being done, whether you outsource it or you do it internally, there has to be an independent expert looking at the implementation, ensuring that it's done properly, and to give feedback and to ensure that we are doing what's supposed to be done at this stage. This is phase one. This is what I would do in phase one. In phase two, I like to see a PMO that's measured and controlled, not in the old-fashioned way. I like to see a PMO that takes into consideration data analysis. There's a big opportunity for PMOs today related to data analysis and data science. But first, we have to look into data readiness assessment. What data do we have as related to projects? How is it stored? How is it managed? How is it accessed? Is it clean? Is it accurate? Is it available? Once we look at that, we can see what can we learn from this data. How can we come up with measures related to performance from this data. What can this data tell us? What are the patterns we can see from the data? And this requires data science, data analysis. So once we look at the data, we can say, okay, this is how we will do data analysis for the PMO. This is the data that we need. This is how it's going to be gathered. This is how it's going to be looked at. This is what the initial look at the data will bring. This is what we will do later as we become more expert in data science. These are the resources we need, etc. And you implement that. Big value can come from looking at the data available in the organization related to projects, and the PMO has a big role in ensuring we see the value from this data. And again, notice always in my phases, we have the initial setup, the big picture, we have the setup and the operation, and we have monitoring and evaluation from the expert. The last phase, I like to see sustainability and improvement built into the PMO. The question here to answer is that how do we ensure that the PMO will stay up to date with the latest techniques and methodologies and technology and people capacity that will ensure we get the maximum out of our PMO? And how do we keep improving on this PMO? So we have to put a design for that. We have to set it up and we have to implement it. Once you do these 3 steps, you will have a PMO that is already operational and showing value quickly. You will have a PMO that's making use of data that is already available in organizations. Many organizations are not looking at it. And a PMO that will sustain and improve on a regular basis. What does the future hold for PMOs? I think PMOs have a very exciting future, but I think the function of the PMO will change a little bit. we have to look at the digital transformation and its relationship to the PMO. I believe there's going to be a profound effect that digital transformation will have on the PMOs because of I think, the availability of data on the cloud. I think the PMO should have a community feel with the software it uses. It has to be social. We need to use data analytics and predictive analytics. There's a lot to learn from the data. We need to use gamification to make using the tools and tracking performance simple and engaging. There are many ways we can do that. Also, we can add game-based learning to build the capacity of the organization and do orientation and maybe build certification into this. And already there are systems and learning management systems that allow us to do this. I think the Internet of Things, we're talking about hardware and software, will play a big role also in the PMO. But we're not going to go into that in detail now. And I believe there's a future for PMO as a service. There are certain types of functions of the PMO that are better outsourced. So I think there will be more focus on the PMO as a service. This is it. This is the presentation. This is how I see setting up a successful PMO. This is what I see the future of the PMO is. If you have any questions, please write me, and I will be more than happy to send you my feedback. Thank you very much.